For almost a century, the actor who defined Sherlock Holmes on stage could not be watched playing him. William Gillette's 1916 film was considered lost until archivists in Paris realized a French serial filed under a different title was the missing feature. The film had not been hidden in a vault. It had been cataloged in a way no one searching for Sherlock Holmes would think to check. Arthur Conan Doyle's stories supplied the detective, but Gillette's stage adaptation made Holmes physically repeatable. He combined plots and characters, sharpened the confrontations with Professor Moriarty, and designed gestures that could read across a theater. Doyle approved the adaptation and trusted Gillette with the role. Touring productions carried this version for decades. Later actors inherited details that viewers now assume came directly from the books. Without moving images, however, historians had to reconstruct Gillette's performance from photographs, reviews, scripts, and a short surviving sound recording. Essanay produced Sherlock Holmes as a feature directed by Arthur Berthollet. Gillette was already in his 60s, but the film captured the performance he had refined since 1899. The story follows Holmes against Moriarty through disguises, surveillance, a gas chamber trap, and a romantic thread involving Alice Faulkner. It was released in the United States as a feature, and later recut in Europe as a serial. That second life would become crucial because the surviving material came from the French chapter version rather than the original American release print. Sherlock Holmes never left the screen. New actors and adaptations arrived through the silent era, sound film, radio, television, and streaming. Gillette's movie, meanwhile, slipped out of circulation. Because nitrate prints were routinely destroyed, re-edited, or stored under local titles, the absence was not surprising. It was still unusually frustrating. Here was the performer most responsible for the character's visual language, preserved in production stills, but inaccessible in motion. Historians called the film a missing link, because every later Holmes performance seemed to lead back toward an actor nobody could actually study. The surviving negative had been prepared for a French serial reissue after the First World War. Its chapters carried translated titles, recaps, and intertitles. One episode was labeled Une Nuit Tragique, rather than simply Sherlock Holmes. Archives inherit material through distributors, private collections, and old deposits. And catalog records may preserve whatever wording appears on a can. A search for one English feature can therefore miss 4 French chapters sitting nearby. Identification required matching faces, story structure, production details, and the serial's relationship to the 1916 release. Curator Céline Roivot's identification was announced in 2014, and the San Francisco Silent Film Festival joined the Cinémathèque Française to restore the material. The nitrate dupe negative was remarkably complete. Although the European reissue had rearranged intertitles and added chapter recaps, the picture content appeared intact. That was better than the usual rediscovery, where only fragments or a shortened export print survive. Gillette had returned not as a few seconds in an actor's reel, but across a feature-length performance. The restoration produced French and English editions. For the English version, researchers translated the French intertitles while consulting Gillette's original manuscripts at the Chicago History Museum. The design echoed the surviving serial titles, and tinting followed notes on the negative. This was not a matter of deleting French cards and inventing replacements from memory. The team documented the reissue structure and used related primary material to move closer to the American presentation. Restoration became detective work, worthy of the character on screen. Watching the film changes Gillette from an icon into an actor. He does not constantly pose with a pipe. He can become still while everyone else moves, then break the composition with a quick decision. His Holmes uses disguise, stagecraft, and dry humor. Some gestures feel theatrical by modern standards, yet the control is unmistakable. The film also reveals what later adaptations changed. Screen Holmes did not evolve in one straight line from Gillette. Performers selected, exaggerated, or rejected pieces of his template. Sherlock Holmes illustrates a category that makes archive discoveries seem paradoxical. The negative was physically safe enough to survive, but its significance was dormant. Preservation without identification protects an object. Cataloging and research reconnect it to culture. Calling the archive a place where a film was hiding makes a good headline, but it understates the labor involved. Collections contain enormous quantities of material, incomplete paperwork, variant titles, and unidentified fragments. A rediscovery occurs when evidence aligns, not merely when someone opens a door. Gillette had played Holmes on stage for years and helped establish details that later audiences treated as inseparable from the detective. His performance survives in the 1916 film with a restraint that publicity photographs cannot capture. He listens without moving, controls a room through posture, then allows dry humor to interrupt the seriousness.
The film is not a pristine record of the stage production. Cinema changes blocking, scale, and timing, but it is the only substantial moving image of the actor in the role he shaped. That is why the recovery matters beyond completing a filmography. It reconnects a globally familiar character to one of the performers who taught audiences how Holmes should occupy space. Discovery photographs and press releases could prove that Sherlock Holmes survived, but the restoration was built to be projected. The San Francisco Silent Film Festival presented the film with live accompaniment and explanatory context, returning Gillette's performance to the communal setting silent cinema expects. That public step is easy to overlook.
An archive can stabilize an object, while only a screening, release, or research copy restores access. Preservation and exhibition are different jobs, and this recovery needed both. For nearly a century, William Gillette's Holmes existed as influence without motion. Then, a French serial negative supplied the missing performance almost whole. The recovery did more than return one silent film. It let viewers compare a foundational stage interpretation with everything that followed. The detective famous for noticing what others overlooked was himself recovered through a cataloging clue: the right images attached to the wrong-looking title. Holmes had not escaped the archive. We had failed to recognize his disguise.